Welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Cabral Concept. We are back today with our second Cabral HouseCall of the weekend. This is where we go over, hopefully you know by now, all of our community's questions each and every weekend. Really love being able to kind of step out of my office, so to speak, be able to sit down with another person from our community, really listen to their question, understand them, let them know they've been heard, and go through what I would recommend just as if we were sitting across from each other on a virtual Skype call or even in my office in Boston. So I love being able to do these because what it really allows for me is to understand where our communities come from, what they're thinking about, and the questions they have. That better allows me to develop full podcast topics on Monday through Fridays, and of course, give you that short answer as to where to start on the weekends with our Cabral House Calls. So thank you once again for tuning in. Yesterday's House Calls, those questions were episode 1541, so you can find those at stephencabral.com/1541. And today's house calls will be at stephencabral.com/1542. And that's where you can tune in for those particular questions. So again, thanks for joining me. Really appreciate you being a part of this community. Now let's dive right into those questions. All right, the first question is from Noel. As you know, I don't prep for any of these questions. What I do is I just say, like, as if this person walked into my office, what's the question? And so let's see what Noel has to say. This came in on March 3rd, and this is being answered today, around April 26th. So that means we're about 6 weeks behind. That's typically where we are. We're anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks of behind in terms of the questions, and that's simply based on how many questions have been coming in. If 100 questions come in a week, well then, we're going to be backlogged for a couple of months. But it's my promise to the community that I'm going to just keep on answering these questions. I have no idea how many questions we've answered now. A couple of years ago, it was 3,000. We're probably well over 5,000 questions answered. I'd love to be able to find out the number, not for posterity's sake or anything like that, but just kind of figuring out, hey, how many questions have we been able to reach? And, I know some are from the same person, but it's just really nice to be able to know that, well, we've spoken to 3,000, 5,000 people from around the world and just gave them at least that place to get started as to how to heal their body, get well, lose the weight, improve their mindset, work on anti-aging. All right, so let's see what Noel has to say. All right, so I'm scanning her question right now. There are 5 questions in one. So Noel, let me give you some answers to these 5. So Noel writes, "Hi, Dr. Cabral. I'm a huge fan of all you teach and share. Thank you. I've collected 5 brief questions below, and I totally understand if you can't address all of them. Noel, I'll do my best." All right. So the first question is this. Zinc. Are there any forms of zinc that do not cause nausea, or some that cause less than others? Some people avoid it, even with food, due to the association. Okay. So zinc can cause nausea with some people, and almost always when it's not with food. The best thing that you can do, I do this with my daughters, I do it with myself as well, is that you have to take zinc mid-meal, okay? So basically you have food in your stomach, you take your zinc, and then you put food on top. And that's the best way to do it. Some of the best forms of zinc that I've seen are zinc picolinate, zinc citrate, and most chelated forms of zinc work really well, okay? They're just absorb better, they work better with food, so that's what I recommend. There are some liquid forms of zinc, like a zinc sulfate. However, their absorption, I've not seen it, it's not that it's bad, I haven't seen it as comparable, and that's in a liquid-based solution. However, you have to take quite a bit of the liquid because the dosages are anywhere between like 5 and 10 milligrams, which again is fine for children, but certainly you'd have to take quite a bit for adults. Also, the zinc, when mixed inside of the daily nutritional support, does not seem to give anybody any nausea because you're mixing that then with 15 grams of protein and all the other vitamins and minerals. Hopefully that's helpful. Number 2 is this, Mimosa Pudica seed. What does this bind or scrub exactly? You mentioned Mimosa Pudica before. I don't think you heard anything about the scrubbing or removal. Okay, so I have mentioned Mimosa Pudica before. Typically, we use it with our parasite-based protocols. How does it work? Well, it basically forms a gel when you absorb it or when you eat it. It's taken as a supplement. You don't eat Mimosa Pudica seeds. So basically, you take it as a supplement. And they've been using this in all sorts of different, I don't think Amazonian-based culture, I think would probably be the best way to say it. But essentially, it turns into a gel. And the gel is very sticky. And it sticks to parasites. It sticks to all sorts of different toxins in the intestines. And it can bind onto them, and it can remove them and draw them right out of the body. So that's essentially how it works, and it's been shown actually to do that with parasites and other gut bugs as well. Okay, number 3, your third question is, what are your thoughts about using topical iodine for skin manifestations, such as a basal cell carcinoma? Okay, so, and then what about frankincense oil? Is that for a similar purpose? Well, iodine is different than frankincense oil. So iodine is antimicrobial, it's antifungal, it's antibacterial. Iodine is very, very powerful. I mean, we know that if we can just add it to water, then we can essentially purify water. So it's a great product, no doubt about it. You don't want to overdo iodine. However, using it topically, you typically won't overdo it. I can't answer the question on basal cell carcinomas because I can't anything on a podcast. There's no treatment, there's no diagnosis, there's no saying that I'm going to cure anything. That's outside of the scope of anything but conventional medicine. Okay. But would I think it would be harmful? No, I do not. Okay. So then differences with iodine and frankincense oil. Okay. So iodine, I just told you, antimicrobial, antibacterial, antifungal. Frankincense oil, best used as a natural, I can't say anti-inflammatory, so let's say inflammation balancing based oil. It is essentially boswellia, and boswellia is one of my favorite herbs as a natural balancer of healthy levels of inflammation. So yeah, I'm a huge advocate of it. They don't work like one. Iodine does not do the job of frankincense oil, and frankincense oil does not do the job of iodine. So hopefully that answers that. Frankincense is used for calming the nervous system. It's used for its antioxidant, anti-aging based purposes. And usually frankincense is you add typically a couple drops to a carrier oil. With that, a carrier oil that I use is jojoba oil or argan oil. And so there you go. All right, Ionic foot baths. Do you find these helpful for heavy metal detox? Just answered this actually on an IHP call. I don't believe there's a lot of harm to them. I believe there's some help to them, but I certainly don't believe that Ionic foot baths are going to draw massive amounts of toxins through the feet. I just do not. What they do help with is that a warm foot baths helps with moving the lymphatic system, and the lymphatic system, by its nature, helps with detoxification. But do I think that if you tested that water for heavy metals in the Ionic foot bath, it would be massive? No, but I bet there would still be some, because if it's hot water and your feet are sweating as well, your feet absolutely do emit toxins. And when you sweat, we know that from a sauna, you would get rid of some metal. So yes, I believe there's some truth to it. It's just, I don't want to go overboard with Ionic foot baths. Okay. The last question, 5-in-1 here. Infra-red sauna, does one need to sweat for these to support heavy metal detox? Is it still beneficial to use infra-red sauna if one is not using enough heat or time to sweat? Thank you. So grateful for what you share. All right. Yeah, that's a great question too. Okay. Infra-red sauna, you're not going to sweat as much as a finished sauna. I've talked about this before. Finished sauna is somewhere around 160 degrees all the way up to 200 degrees. A infra-red sauna is about 120 degrees to about 150 degrees, typically up to like 140 degrees. When I had my massive wellness center in Boston, we were cranking out anywhere from 10 to 16 minimum appointments a day with an infrared sauna. Like, people loved it and so much benefit. The benefit on an infrared sauna is typically staying in that for between 20 and 40 minutes, sometimes even longer. You do want to be in it longer. Now, you don't need to massively sweat, but there should be a little sweat coming from those pores. Turn up the heat a little bit in order to sweat a little bit more. However, it is the far infrared waves that is helping with the greater heavy metal detoxification, namely mercury. And mold we've seen work as well. So yeah, if you do a far infrared sauna, sit in there longer. If you do the finished sauna that's hotter, don't stay in as long. So yeah, you get benefits from both. Huge fan of both. And Noel, hopefully that was helpful. And hopefully it was helpful to everyone. Again, like if these were all personal questions, I wouldn't be able to answer all 5 like that. But since I believe this is good for our whole community, there's a 5-in-1. We won't be able to get to as many questions today, but that was 5 questions. All right. COD is our next person. Hi, Dr. Cabral. A few years back, I had a grand mal seizure, lasted 5 minutes. First time, age 22, ended up having 3 in the space of 3 months. No history in the family. MRI and EEG were clear. Okay, saw some neurologist. They found alcohol might be the trigger. It was the only common denominator. So they diagnosed me with epilepsy, put on some medication, been on the meds for 3 years. Saw a naturopath who mentioned that alcohol and a night out is not enough to make it happen. I want to know your opinion. As of recent, I've been thinking about coming off the meds. And the question is if I should even be on the medicine or if I even have epilepsy. Before any action, I will discuss with my neurologist, but I'm intrigued to know your thoughts. Okay, so I just have to give you the same disclaimer I always give, is that I can't treat, diagnose, cure disease. That's not within the realm of what anyone in natural health does. Only a person with an MD after their name can give you that, and most MDs certainly would not give you that over a podcast as well. But we can certainly help. So here's the thing. I agree with your naturopath that alcohol and a night out is not enough to make it happen if your rain barrel wasn't already full. Now, alcohol and a night out is enough to make it happen if you had already filled up the rain barrel from other things. So I agree with the naturopath in a way. However, I disagree that alcohol and a night out wouldn't be enough. It would be enough. It absolutely would be enough. It's the straw that broke the camel's back, right? But of course, there's something that led to this. Like, I didn't get all of those diseases that I had just from being a little under stressed or from whatever, right? I mean, it was a filling up of my rain barrel. It was poor eating. It was working while in high school, going to school. It was doing martial arts. It was working out. It was studying for my SATs. It was applying for college. It was trying to get in the best schools. It was trying to graduate near the top of my class. It was all these ridiculous things and all the pressure I put on myself, plus the 3,000 capsules of amoxicillin. It was so many different things. So there's never one thing, but yes, there is that straw that breaks the camel's back, as they say. So I can't tell you if you have epilepsy or not, but you certainly had a seizure, and you had 3 of them. So there's at least the potential for a seizure. Now you've been on the medication and you haven't had any seizures. So, there's a correlation if you haven't changed the lifestyle. So what we need to do is we need to work on your omega-6 to omega-3 balance. You might look into using CBD, at least temporarily. We'd look at overall, like I said, inflammation of the body. We'd look at heavy metal toxicity. So these are all labs that I would run, either with your local naturopath that you saw, if they have the ability to run lab testing, with an integrative health practitioner, or with someone that's able to figure out what is filling up your rain barrel. And then, of course, once you figure out what filled it up, you can begin to empty that rain barrel by doing things like seasonal detoxes, fixing the gut, decreasing heavy metals, working on viruses and whatever type of pathogen load you have in the body. Maybe it's parasites, okay? So hopefully that was helpful, COD. Lynn is up next. Hi, Dr. Cabral. I felt quite well before I got half a cc of Restylane injected into my small wrinkle in my nasal. I think we're talking about the nasal labial fold. We just talked about that last week on the house calls, I believe. People asking, how do you decrease the nasal labial fold? Please check out that show if you haven't already, because this would obviously pertain to you, Lynn. So, the problem is with injecting these facial paralysis-based devices and fillers and all of these things that a lot of people are doing. Listen, I get it. We're all searching for the fountain of youth. That's why, I get it. I'm totally not against it. I understand why we're doing it. I just worry about these things that, we're doing because they're not natural for our bodies. So, okay, you start to get a case of the hives, you start to get tingling sensation, knees felt swollen, now they crack when you bend, you feel like you have inflammation all over. Should you continue to work on gut inflammation? You have leaky gut, no H. pylori parasites. What else do you recommend? So, whenever you get a reaction to essentially injecting a toxin into the body, and Restylane, I'm not even exactly sure how we're pronouncing it, is not even one of the worst ones, right? I think this actually comes specifically from hyaluronic acid, which again is not one of the worst ones. Again, hyaluronic acid can actually be really good. But when we're using it as a filler and there's other things in there, well, the problem is that it could be a toxin for the body. So for what I would personally recommend is whenever there's a reaction to something we added to our body, especially if it was man-made, is that I would do a detox. I really would. Why? Because I take the body back to basically a state of equilibrium, a state of less, or I should say healthier levels of inflammation, blood sugar, hormones, etc. So that's my first place. And then, yes, of course, I want to balance inflammation. The easiest way to do that is I look right towards omega-3s. I mean, most people should be using 2 soft gels a day of omega-3 support or 1 teaspoon a day. That's just the baseline amount. And the reason is that if you never run an omega-3 lab, which I really believe everyone over the age of 30 should run it, then for the most part, 9 out of 10 people, that's enough. Like that's the perfect dosage essentially for life. It's what's going to balance arachidonic acid to higher levels of EPA, which EPA is more anti-inflammatory. So it's going to be good for the heart. It's going to be good for the blood vessels. It's good for overall inflammation, joints, muscles in the body. So I can't recommend that enough. It's a place to start. And Lynn, hopefully that was helpful. Selena is up next. Hi, Dr. Cabral. I loved your series about Ayurveda last year, and I was wondering if you could maybe do a podcast about the most common mixed Ayurvedic body types. For example, I'm Kapha Vata. I'm pear-shaped and it's hard for me to lose weight, but on the other hand, my joints are prominent, wrists and ankles are super thin, my skin dry, rough, and I'm always cold. So I'm very confused as to how to eat, work out, etc., as these two body types often get totally different lifestyle advice. Can't wait to hear your thoughts on this. Thanks so much in advance, Selena. Selena, thank you so much for writing in. And you're right. There are mixed body types, and Kapha Vata is one of the ones that most women get confused about. And why I say most women is because there are many people who come to mind who believe they are Vata dominant body types. There are people even out there right now who are Kapha Vata dominant types, and they are Ayurvedic practitioners or people that are teaching on Ayurveda, and they're saying I'm Vata based, and they're not Vata based. They're actually Kapha dominant with a Vata subtype. And they say they're Vata based because they have thinner calves and thinner wrists, thinner ankles, but you can clearly see by the softness of their face, the softness of the body. That does not mean they're overweight. That's where they get confused. Kapha does not mean overweight. I really want to drive that home. Kapha is not overweight. Kapha is the body type, though, that's just more, well, Kapha body type, again, it's not saying it's one thing, but it's certainly more prone to being a softer appearance of the body type, less like seeing of the ribs and the longer oval face, etc. You can go back to my previous podcast on Ayurveda, and that's simply at stephencabral.com/podcast for those people that haven't heard about this. So what do you do when you have a Kapha Vata body type? Well, what you need to do is you're typically always going to need to balance more of the Kapha side. And the Kapha side is going to be more dominant especially during the winter months or the colder months. So what we need to do is we can't overstress the Vata, which would be like over-exercise and really hard resistance training. But for sure, we can do the cardio, which is both good for Kapha and Vata. We're going to do some bodyweight training, no doubt about it. And we're going to make sure that we don't overdo the carbohydrates, but we need enough carbohydrates to calm the sympathetic nervous system of the Vata. So you have issues, let's see, you're always cold. Okay, well, the Kapha body type is more prone to lower thyroid. So let's test that thyroid. Let's run the stress hormones mood metabolism test. You can find that at equilibriumnutrition.com, or you can contact your local integrative health practitioner. So that's what I would do. Skin is dry and rough. Again, could be lower thyroid. So that's what I would like you to work on right away. And the Kapha Vata is absolutely more prone to higher sympathetic nervous system dominance, and then at the same time, the lower thyroid, okay? And where, again, a Vata body type does not typically have lower thyroid, but a Kapha Vata would. Thank you for writing in. Do we have any time? Yes, we still have time for one more question today. All right, Darren's going to be up next and last today, coming in on March 5th. Hey, Dr. Cabral, hope all is well with you and your family. If I remember correctly, you recommend limiting liquid consumption at night to facilitate uninterrupted sleep. However, when I meet the daily water consumption requirements before 7 p.m., and go to bed, I still get up at least twice a night to urinate. And it's a lot. Is it because even though you limit water, there's still fluid there carrying the necessary processes in eliminating waste? Or is there potentially something wrong? I'm a male, early 30s, fit Vata Pitta type, or is the size of one's bladder a factor here? As always, keep up the great work. Okay, so Darren, you could drink 0 water after 4 p.m. and still wake up during the night to urinate if the body is not balanced. I've talked about this before. You can check out previous podcasts if you'd like. It's called, you can call it whatever you want. Again, I hate perpetuating conventional medicine names, but it's just nocturnal. So we call it urination or nocturia. And what happens is people, myself previously included, used to produce more urine than you even consume in terms of liquid. So here's the thing. There's all sorts of different reasons people say that it may be, but I'll tell you this. When your body is not in a deeper level of sleep, so you're staying in a lighter level of sleep, you are not producing something called antidiuretic hormone. And when you're not producing, it can mean that your sympathetic nervous system is still more active at night. So here's the thing. I see a lot of people have to wake up when they have a virus, they have health-based issues, have to wake up in the middle of the night to urinate far more often. And what happens is we begin to get them in a deeper level of sleep. So one of the things is your hypothalamus actually helps to regulate antidiuretic hormone. So the hypothalamus also regulates the body when it's in more of a stress-based state. So if we can get the body in a deeper level of sleep, then it allows you to keep this antidiuretic hormone going while you sleep. That means then you're not going to have to wake up to urinate. So in the simplest fashion, let me put it like this. If you're coming in and out of sleep due to stress, anxiety, something on your mind, fighting a virus, hypoglycemia, anything, then your body may stop producing this antidiuretic hormone, and now you have to wake up and you have to urinate. So that's the interesting thing. Oftentimes we wake up and then our body says, okay, time to urinate, when it's not waking up to actually by the feeling of urination, if that makes sense. Meaning like, what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Well, what came first is most likely, unless you have prostate issues, this is a little bit different, but most likely you woke up and then what happened is your body said, okay, now we can urinate because you're awake. Like you came out of that deeper level of sleep. So that's why I like to see people actually tracking their sleep. It's a nice thing to be able to look at. But more importantly is that we simply start to get people healthier. So we'll do something called the Ultimate Deep Sleep Protocol. We'll use adrenal soothe at dinner. We'll use full spectrum magnesium at dinner. We'll use magnesium citrate before bed. And then we will use liquid melatonin as well. And it allows people to get in this nice deep sleep. And then they wake up the next morning like, wait a minute, I only woke up once, or I didn't wake up at all. And sometimes it takes a week to 3 weeks to really kick in. But if you are getting into a deeper level of sleep, I know you said you're a Vata, which means you're going to be a little bit more restless potentially by nature, then this can be tremendously helpful. So it's at least a place to start. There are multiple factors why some medications cause you have to wake up to urinate. Stress, again, I spoke about before, viruses, health issues, stress, all of these things can pull you out of that sleep. Darren, hopefully this was a great place to get started. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. Much appreciated. I hope you've had a great weekend. I look forward to speaking with you again tomorrow on our Motivation and Mindset Monday show. As always, if any of these questions were helpful, if any of these answers were helpful, please do feel free to share it with anyone you believe it can serve. Take care, everyone. Have an amazing rest of the day. I want to sincerely thank you for your support of this podcast. I couldn't do it without you, and I mean that. I truly do. I also want to make sure you knew that we now have multiple ways for you to find your answers to the most difficult health, wellness, weight loss, and anti-aging questions. You can find podcast-specific topics like thyroid, adrenal, hormones, sleep, digestion, Ayurveda, and many more at stevencabral.com/podcasts that will then link you to your favorite Apple, Spotify, and other podcast players. Plus, all new podcasts and weekly exclusive video content is being added to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Stephen Cabral. And that's Stephen with a PH. Head on over and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the exclusive content. Lastly, if you've ever found any of my podcasts or books to be helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a review on iTunes or your favorite media player for the podcast. Rating and subscribing to the YouTube and podcast allow me to reach more and more people and help spread my mission of healing throughout the world. Thank you again for being a part of this movement.